Hi, my name is Kimberly and welcome back to my channel. Grow Global is this year's sponsor for Lex Infinitum 2020, which is a mediation competition in Goa, India. We were actually the sponsor for last year's Lex Infinitum Mediation Competition, and we filmed the finals of last year's final round. We thought, as upcoming competing students and people who are curious about mediation all over the world, that you might be interested in seeing last year's finals. So stay tuned for 2019's final round of Lex Infinitum.
Is, what's brought you here today? What are your key concerns? What are your priorities? And what are you hoping to get from today? Okay. You'll have a chance to do exactly the same. I don't want you to respond to what's being said. I really want you to present your side of the story. There will be a chance for you to ask questions and respond. And hopefully, after that, we'll have some clarity about what are the key priorities for you to discuss through the session. And hopefully you'll be able to narrow things down to a point where you can reach some agreement on all the issues. Okay, that's enough talking from me. Any questions or concerns before we get started? Yes.
Aled, may I receive confirmation that everything in this mediation session will be confidential?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And one other thing I just wanted to check. I know, again, we've covered this in our meetings previously, but just to clarify, we're on the same page. You have full authority to settle this dispute today?
Yes.
Excellent, okay. Questions?
Aled, during your explanation you mentioned something about caucuses. I'm not sure I understood that fully.
Okay, so there may be information that you want to disclose to be private. You may have some concerns or some questions that you want to run through with me. We can do that in private. I'll ask the other side to step out momentarily. We'll have 5 minutes and you can share that information with me, or we can have a discussion. Is that clear?
And will that information be between just you and me, or between us and you, or will that also be revealed?
That's a good question. So there's a wrapper of confidentiality around this conversation, and there's another layer of confidentiality that will be around our separate conversations. And I'll check with you when we do and if we do have those meetings. Okay, answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Excellent, okay. So could I invite Mackenzie Avery to tell your side of the story, please?
First of all, Aled, thanks for agreeing to mediate today. Which know that this dispute is one in which we can definitely come to some sort of solution, because that's what we've come to the table with, in mind with. Additionally, let me also mention that, let me mention my express thanks to Jordan for convincing to come to this table, because this is definitely something that we see being very fruitful. If I may, I just like to go over the brief facts as our client sees it, and then maybe Mackenzie can tell you about what she feels basically about it. Our two companies essentially started our association of around, I think, a year ago, I believe. At which point, you wanted supply of iron ore from Smeltco. This was to be provided from our mines in the country of Ireland. At which point, we believe that the shipping costs would be affordable for us, as their base is operating in Thailand, correct me if I'm wrong. And that would help, keeping these values in mind, we decided a contract value of a total of $29,200,000 US, due to some unforeseeable circumstances, as Mackenzie will further tell you about. We weren't able to meet this to deliver on this promise, because at the same value, because the mines in Ireland were taken over and nationalized by the government, and because of this we weren't able to provide you any ore from there. We had to provide it from several sources, for which the shipping costs were likely increased. We suggested you a revised amount, for which I believe there was no communication of either of a no from your side. And after this, after this you had sourced this material from somewhere else at a similar value. I think I'd just let McKinsey handle this.
First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to come to this mediation session. Thank you, Aled, for mediating this session. I'm really hopeful that we'll figure all our problems out and go out happy. But I'm just going to come straight to the point here. First of all, you contracted with us because, as you know of our reputation, we're a very reliable source usually. And what happened with the mines was not something we could have reasonably foreseen, and it was really not under our control. And I understand that the nationalization of mines affected certain industries. We weren't able to supply them, but you have to try and understand that cement port took a huge hit because of the mines being nationalized. Not just financially, but also emotionally. This is a family business, and that was the first expansion project that my grandfather initiated, and it's even named after him. So, a lot of emotions and emotional attachments very dear to me. And apart from that, of course, a lot of other contracts were interrupted because of the mines being nationalized. And the thing is, we tried to, we offered you that another price at which we could give you provide the ore to you, and all of our other clients agreed, and so there wasn't really much of a problem there. The only problem was that Durban Industries not accepting our proposal. You have to know that it was the best possible offer we could come up with. That was the best we could do, and my key concern here is one that the breach, if it happened due to no fault of ours. It was really something, the fact that the mines were nationalized made it impossible for us to give you the ore at the price that we agreed at. And and the other key concern is that we did provide 80,000 tons of ore. One installment was sent, and I really don't understand the reason for refusal of payment for something that we have provided. And on a slightly unrelated note, after the nationalization of the mines, we are getting all our employees and former employees to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And I think there may be a few employees of Durban Industries who are former cement co-employees, and we'd really like your permission to allow them to sign a non-disclosure agreement with us for the period that they work with cement co.
I also need to mention that over the course of the session, I will not be making any decisions for my client. I'm only here in an advisory capacity, and I'll be only protecting the legal interests of my client.
Okay, thanks very much, Mackenzie and Avery. Just a very quick summary, just to make sure that I understand clearly what's important for you today. It sounds like this is important to you. It's been in the family for a while. So the nationalisation of the mines came as a shock and disappointment because it sounds like it's impacted on your business significantly. Is that right? Okay. As a consequence, that's had an impact on your relationship with Durban and your ability to fulfill the contract. Okay. And what you really are interested in getting from this mediation, in the first instance, is a real understanding of, or clarity as to what the reasoning behind refusing to pay for that initial shipment of ore, and also then wanting some permission or cooperation from Durban about Durban, for some of their own employees who are former employees of Smelt to write NDAs. Okay, alright, good. I'm on the same page. Okay, thanks very much. Terry Jordan, I'd like to hear from you. Please just focus on what's really important for you to get from today, what's brought you here, what are your key concerns.
Thank you, Aled. Mackenzie, Avery, thanks a lot for that clarification statement. I think it puts a lot of things into context for us. Primarily, I think that because mediation in general is not a blame attribution exercise, I guess we should stay away from words like problem and breach. It gives a little bit of an odd tone to it. So a little bit of context, who am I? Basically, at the bottom line of it, I am a businessman. I've spent 30 years building the company known as Durden Industries. Now, I can tell you a lot about, how I poured my heart and my soul into the company, but I think that's a bit cliche coming from me, because at the end of the day, really I'm a businessman. And I think you can basically see the effort that I've poured into my company via its fast expansion. So, as Mackenzie and Avery already nicely summarized, I think I should also give my spin as to how the contract was signed. So, some context. Basically what happened was that at one point in time there was an economic boom. And as with all economic booms, there was an increased demand for products such as steel, shipping containers from our end. And there was a reason why we contracted with, Smelt Coal, because, we had to get a new supply of steel to iron ore to create steel to meet the demands of our clients. So, given this massive demand of products, the thing is that because we are in the midst of the expansion, we actually have very little capacity to produce these products. And as a result, we actually spent $5 million, I'm quite sure you're aware of that, to upgrade and retool one of our plants, a couple of our plants. So really, when we contracted with Smelt Coal, the idea was that we were getting the steel for, because, $13 per ton for shipping is quite cheap. And the reason why we had to get it at that particular price was because we had to, we were trying to increase our profit margins, because we had to reduce the prices from which our clients paid us, because there were longer times to be waited by them. So, really, Mackenzie, when you talk about the nationalization, I really sympathize with you, because as a businessman, I assume that nationalization would hurt your bottom line in your pocket. And really having your infrastructure taken away by you from the government is, like taxes, no one likes them. And while I sympathize with you, the fact remains that the circumstances also have not been ideal for us. We have lost a massive amount of profits. We have lost a great deal of reputation. And I'm sure you know, in this particular industry, reputation really is everything. We contracted with you because to us, you were the equivalent of a non-Swiss Glencore. And similarly, because people contract with us because they think that we are efficient. So really, this loss of reputation, this really cost us a lot of reputation. The $6.3 million we claimed as a form of, when we first launched our suit, was really the difference in cost for source materials, and we also claimed for $500,000 in legal costs. I know that sounds like a lot of money, because I like money myself and I know it's a very large sum. But the fact remains that we've not claimed for a very large sum of money as well. There's $4.5 million of expectation interest, from which we've lost because of longer waiting times, because we've been unable to fulfill the obligations by our clients. So really, we really have four interests here today as Durden Industries. One, there's the issue of our bottom line. Two, there's the issue of accountability to our board. Three, there's an issue of reputation. And four, there's an issue of perhaps future expansion. Of which I think, and I hear from your interest as well, it can really be summed up into two things. One, contractual obligations, and two, the future. I hope at least that seems alright. I think Gerald, you pass the time over to you, we can talk about the legal implications.
Thank you. Right, so I'm here today, and we chose mediation because we believe that mediation opens doors that litigation closes. And we are willing to negotiate with Smelt Coal with an eye on the future to reach a settlement of this issue presented before us today. But I believe it's my duty to inform my counterparts that my client has instructed me to resist any attempt at enforcement of the claim from Smelt Coal of $6 million for the 80K of tons of iron ore delivered to us, plus the 200K of legal expenses at every stage of this mediation. And this is why. To give a little bit of legal context, we believe, as my counterpart has put it, there was an unforeseen nationalization of the ores. We find it very difficult to believe that a nationalization of the ores in a country can happen over the span of 2 weeks. Thus, we believe there was some foreseeability here, and we don't believe that invoking a clause of force majeure or frustration of the contract would be in order here. That's why we do believe that mere economic hardship alone would not be allowed for any party to repudiate the contract. Here we believe that there was a repudiation of the contract from Smart Postcards. We believe that they should have followed through on their contractual obligations, which is why we want to claim the damages incurred by us. That is the sum of $6 million and $6.3 million and $500,000 in legal fees. But we have an eye on the future, and we do hope that out of this mediation session, we do indeed reach a settlement that can indeed open doors rather than having to resort to litigation. Thank you.
I believe Terry put forward certain points of discussion. If we can perhaps have that up on the board, that would be a little bit clearer.
Thanks, Avery. I just want to just check my understanding. I'll come back to you in a second. Thank you both for your opening statements, and it sounds like today's a really important day for you as well. And you've clearly got some commercial priorities. After all, you're very passionate about your business. You've been in it for 30 years, but thinking about the future is also really important. You've also been impacted by this unforeseen circumstance. Sounds like you've got some concerns about, or questions about the circumstances leading up to that and the impact that had on the supply. Is that right? Okay. You've suffered a loss in profit because your CapEx has gone up, I guess, and you've had to invest quite significantly in retooling, you mentioned. It's also damaged your reputation. And as you mentioned, reputation is everything. You talked about reputation being important as well, so that's something you've got in common. It's a good start. And you're claiming 6.3 million as well as 100,000. You also mentioned a figure of 4.5 million expectation cost. Could you say a bit more about that, please?
Well, yes, we did suffer losses of $4.5 million, but as a form of goodwill, we are not pursuing those as of right now. I believe it's about 5/12 of, if we add those figures together, that would be 5/12 of the amount that we believe should be owed in litigation. But let's not use the dreaded L word here. It's not particularly nice. I think as a form of good faith, we're actually getting that sum from. So really, it's about half that sum.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, just before we try and structure an agenda, do you want to respond? Do you have any questions for each other based on what's been said so far?
Yeah, I did have a few questions. You say that you suffered a loss of reputation because you didn't get the ore in time. But the only thing is, we did give you an offer to fulfill the contract in the same time as we have decided. If you could have just taken that, you would not have suffered this loss of reputation. I don't think that's something that can be on us. And to respond to what Jordan said about economic hardships, this was not just about economic hardship. This is about impossibility to perform, impossibility of performance. Just 2 minutes, if you just need that. This is not just about us having economic problems. This is the fact that geographically we are not in a position to ship the ore from where we said we could have. It's as simple as that.
I believe my client's emotions are flying a little bit higher, and I apologize if she offended Terry Ewing anyway in that last exchange. But what I believe she's trying to say is that it wasn't merely a commercial inviability, it was an actual impossibility. You expressed certain concerns about how all the mines in a country can be shut down over a period of 2 weeks. The delivery structure actually of the ore was in such a way that you would get shipments of 80,000 tons every month or every 30 days. Even if it was carried out over a period of 2 weeks, that is still lesser than a shipment of, say, another. I'm sorry, I'm referring to the conflict again and again. We're definitely trying to move, but it is a clarification that is necessary because, Aled, if you will, if you let me, the thing is that we wish to understand exactly why you are adamant, not adamant, why it feels like you seem to not acknowledge the payment for services or ore that you actually did receive in the first shipment. If you could just address that.
To every, I would like to just say that if we would like to have a conversation about the legal outcome of this particular case, we can have coffee later. But I believe mediation today is not about legal arguments. So I'll leave my client to respond to perhaps the offer that was made.
Sorry, Aled, for taking up your time. I believe there are two issues that you wanted us to address. The first issue is with relation to loss of reputation because you gave us an offer. The second issue is in relation to economic hardships. Oh, sorry, the three issues, not two. And the third issue is in relation to the 80 tons of ore sent. In relation to the first issue, I think that the offer we saw as a variation of the contract, and there was no frustration to play. That's what Gerald tells me is the legal perspective of it. I don't particularly understand the legal consequences of these words, but from my perspective, what happened was nationalization doesn't take 2 weeks to happen. In general, I believe that most countries, when they nationalize certain resources, there's usually a period, like a reasonable period of time, which they give notice about that particular nationalization. So I find it particularly hard to believe that in 2 weeks, all of a sudden, we get a notice, and that tells us, hey, now you have to pay about 10 million more, 10.4 million more to get the ores that you ordered. And that's the reason why we did not accept the variation of the contract, primarily because A, we already have our bottom lines, B, we have accountability to our shareholders, and C, I didn't see why, I'm sorry if it sounds a bit aggressive, I didn't particularly see why we had to pay a larger sum, given that nationalization really isn't a 2-week process. Now, the second issue that we talked about was economic hardship. I believe that issue that Gerald put up, we see it as a form of economic hardship because we don't see it as a form of frustration. It's a completely legal issue. Then again, we don't want to use the gender L word, so let's just park that aside for a bit. In relation to the receiving of the 80 tons of ore, we believe primarily that given that, from our perspective, the contract was breached, that's the reason why we kept the ore. Now, the thing is that I don't think right now we should play a game of blame attribution. I think I stated that in my opening statement. I think right now we really should look to the future, look at how we can solve this issue right now, because, well, to be very honest, my board of directors is hot on my heels, and I'm sure that your board is pretty unhappy as well given the situation. So, why don't we discuss more of these issues later after the agenda is set? Gerald, do you have anything to add? Thanks, Gerald.
Okay, thank you both. I've got to put a few items on the flip chart just to keep us on track and on topic and make efficient use of this time we've got together. Sounds like for you both, reputation is an important matter, but I got the sense that focusing more on the future, particularly the commercial future, both for your organisation and yours as well, is a top priority. Is that right? Okay. See that? See that? Okay. Okay. So we've got. restoring reputations. Would that be appropriate? Okay, let's go. You also talked about focus on the future. It also sounds like there's some quantum to resolve at some point. I'll put that just down here. Okay.
Sorry, Aled, I really believe my counterpart Avery was mentioning something about the NDA agreement just now. I think perhaps that could be discussed as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm an old man. Okay, brilliant. Okay. You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to meet, if I might, just in a short caucus with you both. We'll just be 5 minutes. Whilst I'm spending 5 minutes with Mackenzie and Avery, if you could step out of the room, whilst you're outside, I'd like you to think about some of the commercial priorities that you've got over the next 12, 18 months. I'm going to be curious to know, more about your business. So perhaps, when you come back in, you can tell me a bit more about that. Okay? All right. Thank you. Okay, both. How do you feel that opening session went? How do you feel the opening session went?
I have mixed feelings. I like that she's they're willing to focus on the future and not play the blame game. But I feel like at some point in this discussion there will be a sort of blame game, because we really think we should be allowed, we should be given payment for the war that was actually delivered. I think that's one of my concerns here.
Well, just to remind you, this is a confidential conversation, so I'm not going to be revealing anything to the side as you've done so. I'm really curious about this matter that you raised about the NDA. Could you say a little bit more about that, please, and why that's the priority for you?
Right. So there were a few things that happened after we found out about the nationalization of our mines, and I think this is not really something I should be proud of. But a few I sort of sorry. I sort of we with a few engineers we tried to collapse the main shaft of the mine. Because I think it happened because there were a lot of emotions flying. I really didn't want anybody else to use the mine if I couldn't. So that's something we don't really want anybody to find out. And I think one of the engineers who was with me has now joined Durban Industries, and we just want to make sure this stays confidential. And yeah.
I see. And any idea what would happen if somebody did find out? I mean, what are the implications for you on the business?
I'm guessing probably the state of Ireland would probably be not the happiest, because they would realize that we've cut down on their productivity. Nationalization of these mines is no point if they don't actually end up producing any ore. So that is definitely one thing that we would like not to have discussed with them. However, the NDA is something that we want to pursue, and the employee in question in particular, his name is Jared, and we have been in contact with him. He is already willing. The only step that is required to complete this process is Durden's approval or their intimation about the same, which we believe should be something that is definitely on their minds, because even while I missed out and on the agenda point, Terry got up to it, which was definitely a big positive for us.
Okay, so it's lined up, but you need cooperation on that.
Exactly. Yes.
Very important matter.
Yes.
Okay, what else is important for you today?
I think that's about it. We just want to talk about the issue of money.
Okay.
I don't think, considering that we believe the contract is sort of frustrated, because we could not, there was no way we could fulfill the terms of the contract exactly as they were. So we really don't think we are liable to pay them the damages, nor are we in the position to pay any sort of damages right now.
Okay. And you've got mines in other continents, right? Is that right?
I'm sorry,
You've got mines, iron ore mines in other continents?
We do have mines in other continents, but the only reason we couldn't supply it was because the shipment costs would have changed.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, and our production cost is lower in the okay, pretty much saying. Alright, okay. Is there anything you'd like for me to share with the other side based on what you just told me?
If you could, we'd like to shift the point of, we definitely understand the concerns with reputation and focus on the future, but we'd like for quantum to be a little bit more key in the proceedings today, because that is something that we see as a little bit more important to us. Reputation is definitely a factor, but we'd like to ensure that we have a quantum first, because our company is facing, because my grant's company is facing a bit of a loss that is that capital requirement is really necessary for us, and at such point we would like to discuss the terms of the quantum.
Okay, tell me about the loss. A bit more about the loss. Could you tell me a bit more about the loss?
Yeah, so because of the nationalization of the mines, we've lost one source completely, and I think the loss is around $16 million per year until we can find another source.
Okay.
We have our eyes on the source, but I think it will take us at least 3 years for that to actually start giving us results.
Okay, okay. Our time is up, I'm afraid. But just to close this off, the one issue you'd like me to raise, I think it's appropriate, is exploring the reputational matter, the quantum.
Yeah, we like to. Reputation is important, but we like to discuss quantum.
All right. Okay, thanks. I'm going to have a conversation now with Dirk and Terry and Jordan. Would you be willing to step out, please? And once you're outside, if you give some thought to. Okay, hi. We've got about 5 minutes, so I'm going to try and make use of this efficiently. As everything's confidential, as I mentioned earlier, unless you want to reveal anything additional.
I think in general, and I think you can sense it because I feel in particularly, the tone of this particular session has been a bit defensive. I think that's the reason why I kept using terms like, this is not fault-finding exercise, let's not use words like problem or breach. I think that clearly there needs to be some form of openness from from Mackenzie and from Avery. I say this because really, at the start, in their opening statement, Mackenzie, if I'm not wrong, Avery started talking about non-disclosure agreement, and I think that's a bit problematic, especially in the course of negotiation, given that everything is already confidential. So we do want to know what's going on there. You talked to us just now about commercial priorities. As I stated in my opening statement, the first thing one of the biggest things is really accountability to my board. At the end of the day, even though my name is on the company, the board still controls me to some extent. And that's the reason why I need to justify why 6.3 million was spent there, and I need to recoup some of that. The second issue that really is a commercial interest for us is future expansion and future relationship, and that's one of the reasons why we brought up the NDA. We think that really being able to talk openly with Mackenzie and Avery is the best way to move the process forward and to create a better future commercial relationship with them. Charles, do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Mr. Mediator, Aled, I think we need your help. I think we need your help in helping us communicate better. We would like to know the interests that are driving the as my client puts it, defensiveness of Smart Pro. We'd like to know how we can create solutions rather than fault find, as my client puts it. So perhaps, Mr. Mediator, if you could manage the process a little bit for us and help us ask questions that go to the root of our interests so that we can start finding solutions rather than finding faults. Thank you.
Or alternatively, because as you said earlier, you are an only partial presence. Perhaps, is there a way we could better phrase our questions insofar as understanding their interests? I understand that some of the questions that I asked just now may have been a little bit pointed. The reasons why I asked, the questions I asked insofar as when did they know that their mines would be nationalized? These are things that we feel could help us better understand their interests and what they are looking for in the future process.
Okay, so sounds like you really are looking for my help here to reduce the defensiveness that you're experiencing through the conversation and try and get underneath some of those core concerns, is that right? Okay. Just for a moment, you've been running your business for 30 years, is that right? Is it 30 years?
Yes, 30 years.
Okay, but when you presented your opening statement, you were very clear. You're a very hard-nosed commercial operator. That was the impression I got. Did I miss something?
Thank you for that. That's actually a very big compliment.
Okay. And I'm wondering if you were in Mackenzie's shoes, or what might be going through your mind listening to what you just said in the opening statement.
I think in general, the thing was that I hoped my opening statement would have been a manner to which to understand our perspective to it. I thought that it would be a way to basically understand our interests so that we could hear their interests more clearly later, especially in the open session. That way we could find a solution to this issue.
Aled, I think my client was a little bit hard-nosed, as you put it, because we believe that in this particular case we were wronged, but we've come down in good faith and want to work in the best faith so that we can move forward and perhaps, Aled, I hope you understand that as much as we do want to empathize, we would like them to empathize with my client as well.
Okay, alright, thank you. Just to clarify, it sounds like you're under pressure from your board as well.
Yes.
Okay, and you need to justify some degree of that 6.3 million.
6.3 and if I heard last 6.8.
Alright, okay. Our time is up, I'm afraid. Is there anything specifically you'd like me to raise with the other side before we close?
I think perhaps specifically we want to find out more about this non-disclosure agreement that they raised, because I think that there must be a reason behind it and we need to understand that more. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Thank you very much for coming back. Okay, we've got some agenda items up on the flip chart, and I'm inclined to get interested in the first of those agenda items, just to hopefully pave the way for a more fruitful conversation about the other items. Could you perhaps say a little bit more about why your reputation is important to you?
Thank you. I think, and I'm very sure Mackenzie and you can completely empathize, right? The way the market for manufacturing really works is it's a lot of trust, because you're dealing with a large number of items. There's a very specific time limit, a specific timeline set, very similar to how supply of goods is done. And because when we are not able to fit with that specific time limit, then of course our reputation is lost. I'm so sorry to ask this. Could I also understand, because you stated in your opening statements that reputation was also an issue, and you also brought up the idea of a non-disclosure agreement. Could we understand, are there any reputational issues that are concerning you?
It's not necessarily to do with any issues as such. We just like to have all bases covered, because nationalization brings with it certain nationalization of the mines would brings with it certain operational possibilities that we just like to have all bases covered. It's not necessarily us.
Just nothing specific.
So, for the avoidance of doubt, from SmartCo's side, with regard to reputational damage, there is nothing in specific. Is that correct? There is no specific reputational damage that you have suffered. Alright. Perhaps then could we understand, Avery, I believe you mentioned something about the non-disclosure agreement of your former employees. I think my client would like to say something about the fact that some of your ex-employees have been interested in signing on with Durham Industries, and perhaps we believe that there is something that SmartCo would like to come forward with and explain to us why there was a motion and interest to propose this non-disclosure agreement.
I think, like my counsel was saying, there was nothing very specific. We just thought that because of the nationalization of the mines, there may be a certain amount of scrutiny on our company. It's just more of a precautionary measure. And we have been talking to our ex-employees who are working with Durham Industries, and they seem open to the idea of signing the non-disclosure agreement. We just need the green signal from Durham Industries.
Mr. Mediator, I believe in the caucus just now, we did ask for your help with regard to managing the communication across parties. We would like to address the interests of SmartCo here today with regard to the options that we come up with. Perhaps, Mr. Mediator, you could reframe our questions and perhaps facilitate this option generating process a little more. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So, you had some concerns about the way this conversation is currently going, and you want to try and burrow into the issues that are really important to you, is that right?
Yes, Aled.
Okay, you'd like my help doing that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. It would help me if you could say a little bit more about the reputational issues.
The reputation
on your side as well.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, please, yeah, if you could say a little bit more about that.
What other questions do you have about the reputational issues?
Well, you mentioned how you lost, I'm paraphrasing now, but due to the problem with the supply, you weren't able to serve some of your customers. And you not only have you lost reputation, you lost profit. I'm just curious if you could say a bit more about that, maybe.
In general, we have lost $4.5 million in profit, and all this additional profit loss is left out because we goodwill and we are here to mediate. I think reputation in general is something that can be rebuilt. For us, reputation can be rebuilt via future expansion, and we are very willing to work with SmartCo on that, given that SmartCo is a huge name, it's a huge MNC, so that's one. So I'm so sorry. Avery, Mackenzie, just now you indicated something about scrutiny, government scrutiny. Could I understand if what issues are there really about this government scrutiny? Is there anything wrong?
If you could give me 1 second with mine.
I'd just like to make sure that whatever we say in this room is confidential and will not be going out and cannot be held against us in a court of law, or
Everything is without prejudice and confidential, absolutely.
all right. In absolute conference, my client here has authorized me to tell you a few details about the closing of or the nationalization of the mines that happened. Again, operating under complete confidentiality. The way my client is actually quite emotional about one of the mines in Iran, which is called Walklaw 2, which is named after her grandfather. In furtherance of that, when the government started to nationalize these mines and started to shut them down, my client felt very strongly that such mines should not be used by the government because they were technically hers and hers alone. In perhaps operating wrongly in hindsight, but at the time what she felt correct to do was she spoke to a few engineers at Smeltco and collapsed the main shaft of this mine, which made it unusable for the rest of the government. If the government again institutes a suit against us, we would like to ensure that Smeltco is not up to any scrutiny, and to do this we need to ensure that the engineers who were part of the plan are also covered under a non-disclosure agreement. One of the engineers in particular, I think.
One of the engineers called Jared, who joined Earth Industries after this incident, we'd be comfortable. We'd be very happy if we could work something. We would work out the non-disclosure agreement. And I'd just like to reiterate, I understand it's not something, it's not the smartest thing to do and not the right thing to do even, but I need to protect my business now.
Can I just say, I really appreciate the risk that you've just taken there in being open and transparent, and I think you've taken a huge step in moving towards discipline, and I'm curious what's your reaction to the openness from the other side?
So, firstly, thank you so much for that. I think this really builds upon the trust that we have, because I think you have to admit that the starting of this entire mediation wasn't the most nice. So hopefully, building on this trust, we can talk about future issues later. I just want to give you full confidence. We have no interest in helping the government pursue litigation against you. We import Mr. Gold for his expertise and his expertise alone. If you want to sign a non-disclosure agreement with him, we believe that this should be only in relation to the nationalization of the mine and not expertise that he received or basically commercial understandings that he had when he was with your firm.
They will only be related to his time that he was working at Smeltco, and in particular, if I may just clarify, you are asking that it only be related to the incident and not extend to his entire working period at Smeltco?
That is correct.
Alright. If I may just have a moment to discuss with you.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for being understanding and sympathetic and empathising with some of the concerns and challenges the other side have had. I get the impression you've made a huge leap just in those last few minutes, so I want to congratulate you both there. Sounds like the fine print of the NDA relates only to the nationalisation and not any knowledge gained working for. Because you're happy with that.
Right, I think that works for us, and thank you so much for that. Coming into this mediation, like Debbie rightly said, I was not in the best state of mind, but this has really made me comfortable. I think I am again very hopeful for the next.
Excellent, excellent. I really enjoy doing this when it comes to working through issues. So looking at the next issue on the agenda, where would you like to go next? On the basis that, it sounds like moving forward is what's important.
Yes, thank you, Aled. I think at this current point in time, since we have understood the interests behind the non-disclosure agreement and in principle agreement we share that this non-disclosure agreement will be in relation to this nationalization of the mines of all former employees of Smeltco. Perhaps on this positive note, we could move towards talking about future mediations first and exploring opportunities together and opening doors together. I do believe my client has a certain proposal that she wishes to make, and
If I may just interject, I'm really sorry for interrupting, but could we, I understand that my client is facing a huge loss over capital because of the nationalization of these. Could we just first deal with the issue of quantum, if at all, because that is something that we appreciate that you're taking great steps in moving towards a future solution. But perhaps if it could relate to quantum first and then move to future relation, because the need of capital is very urgent right now.
Sorry.
Yeah, can I just pause for a second? I think we'll have plenty of time to address the issue on quantum. I'd be curious to hear what they've got. Because sometimes you might find the conversation going on in the other direction that is more favourable and fruitful. I don't know, but I suggest you do that.
Yeah, I think we could share that.
Thank you, Mr. Aled. I'll just like to say that the reason why I want to go and talk about future relations is really because we believe that the promise of the future is something that will motivate us together to collaborate better with the quantum issue, because we know that there is disagreement there. Perhaps the promise of us will move us closer towards reaching an agreement. So at this point,
Thank you, Gerald. Basically, we do have, in all confidence, because really this kind of information, if spread out to the wider market, could influence our share prices, right? In all confidence, what's happening is that we as Garden Industries are actually looking into starting mining operations and doing it ourselves, because we wouldn't like a situation like what happened in the past. The thing is, and I think we all know that, entering into such, primary industry is very expensive. So what we were considering was starting a subsidiary company with you, leveraging on your expertise, leveraging on your name, and perhaps create a better supply chain for mining in general, so that we could perhaps expand larger and basically accumulate profits for both parties.
Thank you for that offer, Henry, and it's great that you trust our expertise in this field. But there are, I just have one problem. Because of the nationalization of the mines, we are going to face quite a huge loss over the next few years. I think if we don't figure that out, we won't be able to start another venture before handling our losses right now.
Mr. Kinsey, may I just clarify? When the mines were nationalized by the government, could we confirm that there was no payment or compensation made to you by the government?
There was no payment.
Thank you.
If I just may tell, I think that the problem here is that I think Mackenzie also, maybe what we can address is it's not just iron in which we have our mines. They suggested starting a company to source ore from. Maybe that can be in one of the other countries that we own mines in, and maybe that can be a way of starting your subsidiary in not necessarily Ireland, but maybe other countries where we also own our mines.
I'm so sorry, I didn't really understand that much. Do you mind helping clarify a little bit?
Yeah, I think if I understand correctly, you very generously proposed one option, which is entering into some kind of joint venture with Stout to leverage their expertise and streamline the supply chain, bring all the costs down, increase your margins, which sounded very, very interesting, very exciting, and it sounds like that you've got iron ore mines in other continents that are fully operational, and rather than reigniting or something that is so you can look at potentially other territories where you have operations.
Yes, we could, but maybe not just now. It will take us a little time because we lost a major source of our ore. So right now, I think we need to find another source, and then we need to figure out if we can sort of use our other mines to compensate for the loss. So it's a great idea. We'd love to work with the Durban Industries, but I don't think that's a decision we can make right away.
Mackenzie, I appreciate you being so candid about the losses and the problems that you face. I think my client appreciates it very much as well. Before I hand my time over to the client, I think perhaps a reframing of the problem is in order. We know that you're facing losses right now. That is also our situation right now. The reason why we're talking about the future is because we believe that there's a promise of future profits. There's a promise of future greater profit margins than anything that we can settle here for. At the most, any sum that we agree upon is in the margins of $6 million. Compare $6 million now with the multiple millions of dollars that we can earn in the future. With just one contract, we can agree that there are tens of millions of dollars that can be made. Think about the possibilities.
I think Gerald starts on a very positive note. Mackenzie, I understand your concerns, and from what I gather, it's not an issue of whether or not the profits will materialize. It's really an issue of whether or not you even have the liquidity now, whether or not you can continue as a going concern. And I know this is a bit blunt, but could I just understand how dire is the financial situation in Smeltco?
Okay, I'll be perfectly candid here. We will be facing a loss of at least 10 million per year, 16 million to be very specific, per year until we find a different source. It's not something I'm worried about it. I'm sure we can get out of it, but it will take time for us.
Sorry, just to clarify, Director, the 10 million loss per year is due to the nationalization alone.
16 million, Terry. And I think what my client is trying to say here is that while we understand and appreciate that you are offering us potentially tens of millions in the future, what we would also like you to understand is that those potential tens of millions perhaps can't be made if the payment of 6 million right now is not, because our requirement of capital is also very urgent. And this is a necessary step in acquiring those in the future too.
Okay, so it sounds like you're making some great progress, and the future looks potentially very bright. But right now you have quite a pressing issue of liquidity, and that 6 million that is outstanding from your perspective. With that could catalyse a move into finding an additional iron ore source. What's your reaction to that?
If I just may, I'm sorry, if I can add to that, if we can discuss a future relation that perhaps also has a payment clause inbuilt that accounts for $6 million of the dollars of the contract immediately, and payment otherwise is deferred. Perhaps that could be something that's an agreeable.
That could work.
I'm so sorry, I didn't particularly understand that option. Do you mind perhaps clarifying it for me, maybe drawing it out a bit?
So as I understand, your offer is that you choose to open a subsidiary under us.
Yes.
After this, yes, together. And after this, we will leverage our experience to get your ore for cheaper, which is a great deal for us too, because that takes care of our shipping concerns straight away, because that will be yours to handle. I genuinely appreciate that you took that into account, because that is something that affected the price. I'm sorry, I'm digressing a bit, but it's really, we're making forward steps in this session, and I choose to appreciate that. Additionally, I would like to understand how this operation was going to be profitable for us too, in terms of any revenue that you could give us. The last thing that I said was that in terms of any revenue that you were going to give us, perhaps we could figure out a way that we get 6 million of potential revenue straight away, and then have any additional revenue that you were going to promise us in a deferred form, or as you were originally going to offer us.
Avery, I can clearly see both you and Mackenzie's concern in relation to remaining a going concern. I have to admit, even though I have a lot of belief in the subsidiary, as of now, we haven't done full and complete market research. We do have some research on it, but we will never know for certain how profitable it is. I do have an option, however, in relation to whether or not, in relation to the lack of liquidity in your company. And that really is in the form of commercial loan. We can loan you a certain sum of money, and that can tide you over for a bit. I think that given your current situation, installment payments is the best option, and we could basically take a leaf from a lot of other commercial entities. We would charge a minimal interest rate based on maybe the 4 largest banks in ARIAN given that that's where the location that most of the funds are in.
Okay. Can I just clarify something? So you're proposing a commercial loan, offering a commercial loan. Again, I really appreciate the ideas that you come up with. I think it's really helpful that you're making tremendous progress. Well done. And the commercial loan, is that in order to cover the 6 million, or is that over and above? I'm a bit confused, right?
In particular, with regard to the loan, we're hearing from SmartCo that they are interested in the 6 million sum. That's correct? Yes. So the loan will cover that 6 million sum from us. And understand, for the avoidance of doubt, that this means that we will call it quits. We will call the current litigation claims made by us now, same to you on your side, for this current loan of 6 million, for the commercial loan of $6 million, that once we establish the joint venture, for joint venture between us, will be paid over time in installments that will be, the quantum of which will be settled by auditors at a later date.
For some clarity, this isn't a compensation. This is a loan, good faith and goodwill, because we believe in SmartCo. It's a very, very large company. We can give you installment payments. We can check your auditors and talk about it on a later date. What we really want to do is allow SmartCo to tide over the current dark times.
Okay, thanks for that proposal. What's your reaction to?
Thanks a lot for that idea, Terry. But I'm really sorry I'm going to go back to this issue. But coming into this mediation, I really believed that those $6 million were owed to me, because it was a service that's meant to go provided to Turtle Industries, 80,000 tons of ore, and I really don't see a way around that. I don't think I love the idea of working with you, but I don't think I want that 6 million as loan. I want that 6 million as consideration for the ore that I provided.
Okay, so it sounds like you're very serious about entertaining the possibility of a joint venture in the future, and your proposal to provide a loan was a way to offset that 6 million. It sounds like you've got some concerns about that, and you feel an entitlement to that money, and that's going to help move this potential future relationship forward. Is that right? Is there any cash flow parameters around the 6 million? Does it need to be paid immediately? Can you swing it out? I'm just wondering. Yeah, sure. Now we've got a few more minutes, so I think we'll keep going.
Aled, perhaps, sorry to interrupt. Aled, perhaps I could chime in a little bit. I think we hear you. My client definitely hears you. And we know that you're facing losses, and you believe that the 6 million claimed by you is rightfully owed to you. That is us stepping into your shoes. We hope that you will also step in our shoes, my client's shoes in particular, and realize that we also think that 6 million, the original sum claimed in litigation, plus a further $4.5 million that we have dropped out of the gesture of goodwill, will us also rightfully owed to my client. And my client here is trying to say, let's put the past behind us, let us move forward, talk about that joint venture that entices us, call it quits, rather than harp on that $6 million in particular.
Mackenzie, Avery, I think that fundamentally, right, we will never be able to agree on the sum of money is owed to us. Because I understand from your perspective, you think that 6 million is owed to you. From our perspective, we think that 6 million is also owed to us, right? We have $4.5 million worth of profits that's gone. we have $6.3 million that we've expended outside of the contract because there's a failure to fulfill that contract. This is not a full attribution game. At the end of the day, let's just call it quits. Let's move forward. And that's the reason why we proposed the loan, because we fundamentally believe in the viability of the company, and we believe that after this, maybe a year or 2 years, installments can be paid, and your company can remain as a going concern, and move from being in the red to being in the black.
Okay, one final response and then I'll wrap things up.
Perhaps we can work out a way for the loan. The interest rates, maybe if they are regulated in a way that takes into account the losses that we are going to face for the next 3 years, in a revenue model sharing agreement where your subsidiary, the profits that it makes also account for a part of the payment, and the interest rates are kept low. Maybe something we can talk about.
In that's a fantastic idea. Of course, I think both of us need to go back and talk to our auditors and accountants. I think we could settle other issues in a later session. We could talk about the details of the loan, how long it's for, guarantees for the loan, and also interest rates as well.
I just want to bring things to a close. I think you've made tremendous progress today, and clearly you're on the right trajectory, and the way you've cooperated is certainly laying the groundwork for fruitful collaboration in the future. Just to summarise, the issue regarding the NDA, you've got some clarity about that. I get the impression that you will work out in a subsequent session this sum of money and how that gets paid and interest rates and so on.
Just one point of clarification.
Yes.
We didn't really agree on the loan as such. We would be open to discussing it.
Yeah. In the next session, you can discuss it comprehensively. Okay, I think that's time up. Well done.
Thank you for watching the 2019 finals round for Lex Infinitum, the mediation competition that happens every year in Goa, India.